I'm on 2,000 hectares of beautiful, picturesque Boorowa country in New South Wales on Charlie Arnott's family farm. He's an 8th generation Australian farmer and he's been farming regeneratively for 20 years. I'm keen to pick his brain on what he's done to bring water hydrology and resilience back into his family farm. And then we're going to talk about markets and the future of family farms in Australia. Charlie, how are you, mate?
I'm well, Tim. Lovely to have you here.
Now, Charlie, the first thing we're going to talk about is building water hydrology back into your landscape. You're building resilience in your family farm through a number of ways. The first is with water.
Yep.
We're standing on a contour. Just explain to me what's happening here, mate.
Well, Tim, some years ago we hosted a 4-day workshop, Talent Park training with Stuart Andrews,
Yep.
his team. And one of the demonstration sites we actually made at that time was this contour. And what I'd identified prior to doing the course was that, you know, we live in the driest continent on the planet. We have a really good reason and motivation to try and retain as much moisture in the profile as we can in our landscape. So we can't make it rain, but what we can do is be prepared for when it does rain to make sure that the rain that falls on our landscape actually stays here. It either goes straight into the ground if there's any above ground runoff, and even subsurface runoff. We can collect them in contours like the one behind us here. So we built this on the back of the workshop that we hosted, and its main function, excuse me, is to any rain that falls on this landscape above it. We're using our good old friend gravity here again, something we can't escape. Water will run off this, especially. It's very dry at the moment, Tim, as I'm sure you're aware, and the soil is very hydrophobic at the moment. So especially at the back of well, hopefully we get some rain and we sort of finish this dry period we're in. Water that falls on this landscape is not going to, even though we've got really good ground cover, you can see here. Water that falls, there will be initially water that sheds off. We want to be able to collect it. I don't want that.
And these contours help spread that water out across your landscape, don't
That's
they?
right.
Rather than concentrating it and getting erosion gullies,
Yes.
You're spreading it out, lifting it up and forcing it down, aren't you?
Yeah, essentially. So I don't want the water falling on our landscape going down into a natural fall, a riparian zone.
Yep.
Might hit my dam, it fills up, it goes into my neighbours, it goes into a creek, it goes into a river.
Takes the fertility with it.
Takes fertility and takes that precious resource of water.
Now, you're doing something really smart over here as well. You've connected your contours with a roadway and a dam. So you're actually linking a natural shedding point on your property, the roadway, with a storage point on your property, and you're spreading the water out across the distance between to hopefully get some more infiltration.
That's right. So this just happens to be finishing on our road. So any water that runs off through the gutters of the road, we do collect and run it back into the paddock again, instead of it going into the riparian zone and down to a dam and a creek and it's gone. So any water that sheds off here, Tim, is collected in the contour going back this way. This one does end up at a large dam. It's a large storage facility.
Yep.
So we're doing a couple of things here. We're harvesting water off the road, which would normally have just gone down to the creek. We're getting some of it in this little pond here. This pond wasn't here.
And you've got a series of ponds along the contour.
That's right, and also overflow. We just drove across one just there before. So if we get a big rainfall event, and that pond fills up and this contour fills up, it's not sending a whole lot of water rushing into a dam. We have these release valves essentially.
Yeah,
the water will run over. Now what we want to do by collecting the water in these contours is to slow it down, and then as that water is absorbed into the soil, it then feeds essentially the pasture below it. So it's like a very slow wetting process. So instead of water hitting that going and gone, we can actually utilise it not too far for when it actually fell.
Now, as a result of that, you're in the middle of a drought. You haven't really had decent rain since December.
No.
And you've still got active springs on this property as a result.
Yeah, we've got, we don't have any necessarily creeks that run the whole year round that is taking a lot of moisture from elsewhere or other farms. But we do have some creeks that I was only at one last week, and I was blown away by the amount of water in what would normally have been a very dry creek. And what that's doing is it's slowly drawing out moisture out of the landscape and letting it flow very slowly through. It's watering stock and it's still hydrating out sideways, because it's not running through that creek like what might normally. It's just trickling through a series of natural little weirs and corners. There's no energy in that water, so it's got time to actually do some good before it does eventually get through our place down to our neighbours and out to the ocean eventually.
Now, speaking of stock management, you're also doing some really smart stock management on the place. Can we go and have a look
Sure.
At a couple of your paddocks and have a chat about the feed that you've got left in the middle of a drought?
100%, let's go.
Let's go. So, Charlie, fair to say you've had 5 months of very low, perhaps ineffective rainfall out here,
Yeah.
coming into a drought. You've still got green in your landscape, you've still got water in your landscape, but you've also got plenty of feed as well, and that comes through stock management, doesn't it? Can you tell me a little bit about your stock management on the place?
That's right. So we try and balance the three inventories of livestock, grass and cash in the bank.
Yep.
They've all got a different value, all very valuable. So what we do to manage the grass in the paddock is we do grass budgeting, so we know exactly how much grass is in the landscape at any time of the year. We often do a re-budget once a month. Now we're coming into winter, we've got pregnant cows behind us, and we know we can get these pregnant cows putting on condition through to calving in early spring. And that's because we know how much grass is there. We've done our budget, we've done a grazing plan, we've got 170 or so paddocks that we can put our livestock through. These girls have probably about 20 paddocks designated to them for the next few months.
They've got 20 paddocks ahead of them leading up to spring.
At least, absolutely.
Now, I notice also in your paddocks, you've got a lot of native grasses. You've got some red grass here.
Yes.
You've got microlina, you've got several other species as well as some exotics. A lot of C4 grasses.
Yes.
And that comes through long rest, doesn't it?
That's right. And so this paddock itself has been rested. We had sheep in here a couple of months ago, but it hasn't had a good graze with cattle for probably 5 or 6 months. And this being a summer active paddock, we wanted it to grow through that summer period. Even though it didn't have very much rain, there was a lot of bulk in here before the cows came in here a few days ago.
Now, you're also, interestingly enough, after 20 years, starting to see a succession in some of your plants, and you're using grazing pressure to manage that succession to get the varieties and species that you want. Some paddocks are actually grazing a little bit heavier than some might. Can you tell me why?
That's right. So, Tim, in the last 5 years we've had very good springs and autumns, and so that's produced a lot of bulky matter we can see through here. And what that does, it actually outcompetes somewhat the legume content of pastures. We want cereals, we want forbs, we also want legumes, and legumes need sunshine. So what we're doing this year is with our sheep and our cows is actually grazing probably a little bit harder than we might normally to try and open that up. So when we do get rain, we get a bit of sunshine, that legume's not being shadowed by the bulky grass species, and it's able to actually start growing, because we're just trying to manipulate the succession and the legume content of our pastures, because that's where the nitrogen is, and that's the stuff that'll really put on the kilos.
So once again, it's all about observation and gentle intervention to get the result that you want. It's not a case of hands off, walk away and leave it alone, because that doesn't work for anyone, does it?
No, look, we're not of the mindset that you dominate and you control. Yeah, this is about enabling nature to do what it does best, and that's grow grass. Back to the hydrological conversation we had before, we're trying to capture as much rainfall as we can. We're trying to use our cattle and our sheep as tools in the landscape to manipulate the succession, manipulate the content and the biodiversity of our pastures. And what we're looking to do is help nature become more diverse, because its main objective is to become more diverse and more biodiverse, and if we've got a biodiverse pasture and landscape, it's much more resilient.
Now, Charlie, you've also got the cattle on a bit of a lick. Can you tell me a bit about the lick that you use? Yes,
Tim. So we want to make sure that our cattle aren't without any of the nutrients they need. So we've also got down near the watering point fine yellow sulphur, bentonite, copper sulphate, we've got Himalayan rock salt, we've got iodized salt, and this year to help them get through this dry material, we're using a bypass protein which has some urea in it as well, and that'll create the environment in their guts, the bugs in their stomachs, in their rumens, to actually break down this lignified material, which would normally not be eaten, or if they did, it'd just go past right through them.
So once again, careful observation and micro interventions rather than wholesale spreading of synthetics across the landscape.
Absolutely. You know, we acknowledge that these cattle need management, and we also know what the outcomes we're looking for. We're looking for production. These cows are pregnant. We also want them putting on weight to put on condition through the winter, so when they calve, they're in really good condition to look after those cows.
So, Charlie, that's not a very complicated fence, mate.
No, pretty
You've got a steel post and one hot wire.
Yeah.
That's all you need.
That's all we need to keep cattle and sheep behind. On the side of the paddock you want them to be on. And the trick is having a lot of grunt, having a lot of power going through that hot wire. Because if you don't, you can have a really complex, complicated sort of fencing set up with electricity. But if you don't have enough grunt, you don't have enough volts going through that, sheep and cattle just walk straight through it.
So that's more effective than a complex fence, a wall of steel, simply because you're running enough power through it. You're running a 10,000i?
That's right. And that's a lot cheaper than a whole lot of wall of steel. It's very easy to fix, and you can do a lot of fencing very cheaply with that sort of a setup, one single hot wire.
Now there's another secret here as well, too. People will tell you that you can't manage sheep behind an electric fence, you can't manage goats behind an electric fence, you can't manage cattle behind an electric fence. Would you suggest perhaps that if your animals are not respecting a powerful fence, it could be a hint to you to have a look at your paddock management?
Yeah, absolutely. You can have a lot of power going through a simple fence like that, or a complex fence, but if they're hungry, and they see green feed on the other side, or any sort of feed more than where they are, they will try every trick in the book to get through to get to that feed. So making sure your sheep and cattle aren't hungry, moving them regularly to fresh feed, ensures that they won't put too much pressure on this. And also, Tim, it's about how you train them onto those fences as well. Especially, you know, if you're trading stock and you've got different stock coming and going, you do have to put some time in so they actually understand what will happen if they do touch that fence.
And different species of sheep particularly either respect or don't respect fences differently as well, don't they? So you might need a few more hot wires, for example, if you've got something crazy like a dorper. You got
dorpers or composites, yeah, they tend to be a bit more stronger willed than a merino. We run merinos. One of the reasons we do is for that very reason. We don't need to heavily reinforce our electric fences just to keep a composite or a crossbred ewe on one side of the fence. So if you are running dorpers, don't run a single hot wire, maybe run a couple. At least a couple. And get your paddock management right. Don't blame the fence straight away. Right. Have a look at the whole management of the farm before you start to hone in on things and isolate stuff, because there could be a key missing ingredient somewhere else. So it's a combination of good infrastructure, good management, and planning of grazing. You can split up paddocks even smaller using the same amount of material and get better grazing pressure, and then animals, sheep and cattle, can be in paddocks for shorter periods of time and bigger mobs and larger numbers, allowing for greater recovery and rest between those graze periods. But one of the key messages that I get out from a lot of people is it's about building resilience into your farm system, isn't it? So we've got a period of extended dry. A lot of people in this area are feeding out at the moment. You've still got 20 paddocks ahead of some of your mobs. At least 20, yeah. You've got resilience in your system, haven't you? Well, there's environmental resilience in that we're building soil quality and quantity. We're planning ahead. We know how much grass we actually have, and so there's the landscape resilience, but there's also, I guess, the resilience of the business itself, and that all comes down to planning, knowing what your animals need at any time of the year, whether they're pregnant or they're lactating or they're dry, and getting the right quality of feed in front of them, knowing how much feed is in front of them. We know we can take these sheep and our cows through all the way through winter to spring now because we've done grass budgeting, and also having really good infrastructure. You can actually control and manage sheep and cattle where you need them, where you want them on that particular type of pasture, and keeping them where you want them. Because sometimes, as we said before, Tim, you want to do a bit of a harder graze on some areas to sort of change the succession that's happening within that, the diversity of that pasture, and we can do that if we've got to get good infrastructure. Speaking of resilience of your business, there are some external factors. Let's go and have a talk about them. Sounds good. Thanks for such an interesting and engaging look at what you're doing on your farm. It's really impressive, the amount of effort and the amount of success that you've had with regen farming. There might be a little cloud on the horizon, mightn't there? And that's in your supply chain. That's right. That's right. There's closing down of access to abattoirs locally. We've had our kill number cancelled, so it means we can't, as farmers, send our animals, a small number of animals, to our local abattoir to get processed.
Now, for those watching, what is a kill number?
Kill number is basically gives you the authority to ring up the abattoir direct and book in a number of animals for processing at the time that you specify.
And so with that kill number, it allowed you to set up direct to market arrangements between you and your consumers. You're able to go directly to your consumers.
That's right. So if I had consumers and our customers wanting meat, it might be lamb or beef or pork, we could just book in direct with the abattoir to have those animals processed, and then those bodies were sent direct to those butchers in Sydney. And we had 3 or 4 of them that we'd send every week, every fortnight. Now, without that kill number, we have to go through a local butcher. So not the butchers in Sydney, and we're 4 hours from Sydney, so we'd have to go through a local butcher to have those animals processed. The problem with that is that butcher would want us to get him to process those animals. So essentially, I can no longer, with ease, supply animals direct to Sydney butchers or anyone who doesn't have a kill number directly with this local abattoir.
Now, is this a problem that you're encountering on your own, or is this a common problem?
It's a common problem. I know a number of local farmers who were doing paddock-to-plate that have lost their kill numbers as well, and it's the same situation. They can no longer deal directly with butchers that don't have kill numbers outside of this local area.
So how does that impact you with the scale of business that you have?
Well, we're lucky that we don't rely solely on paddock-to-plate sales to support our business. We're a reasonably large farm. It was something I loved doing because we got to engage with customers directly. They know where the meat's from. We know it's nutritiously dense and very good for them, and we built relationships around that. So, but for the smaller producers, and a lot of the smaller producers doing paddock-to-plate sort of model of business, they rely on access to abattoirs, easy access to abattoirs, because they're dealing with small numbers. Now, unless they've got very good relationships with local butchers and their meat stays local, it's going to be very hard for them to continue their current business model. And so, again, we don't rely on that necessarily for all our sales, but it has made it very difficult. We actually haven't done any more paddock-to-plate kills since we lost our kill number.
So that has prevented you from accessing a market where you can value add your product?
Absolutely. That's the first chain in that food chain that is essentially now broken. We can't get access to the abattoir, which means our customers can't get access to our meat.
And from what I'm hearing, it's not just in your area that this is a problem. This is across the industry, isn't it?
Absolutely. Our abattoir's an hour away. That's been a problem for us, but I know many farmers in many different other areas dealing with different abattoirs where it's the same thing has happened. We lost our kill number about 12 months ago. And again, we're a larger producer. We don't solely rely on those sales. However, a lot of farmers I do know are now wondering what they can do. They've either have to find another abattoir to have their animals killed, but that means going away from the butchers that they might have been breaking down their animals. So
this will likely see a rationalisation in butchery as well. The next step in the chain will also be affected.
Absolutely. So no longer will a lot of butchers be able to go direct to the source, to the farmer, and have a direct relationship to source their meat. They'll have to go through other wholesalers, or they may be able to go through other butchers that are more local to those abattoirs, but I think that's very unlikely as well.
There's been a rationalisation in the ownership of abattoirs. Do you think that that's a coincidence?
No, I think that I think there's lots of reasons for this, rationalisation. What we were told was it was just too challenging for them to deal with small numbers. I kind of get that. I also believe that a lot of abattoirs see that the less home kills they do, the less small producers they have to deal with, means that they can actually access the markets that those farmers actually had and were supplying that meat to their customers. It's very easy for them to just say no to the small producers and pick up their clients.
So there's an anti-competitive incentive for abattoirs to actually say no to small producers so that they can monopolise the market.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a bit. It's not the small producer doesn't represent a huge part of their market. However, it's enough for them to.
It's the high value end of the
absolutely,
market, though, isn't it?
absolutely, yeah. And I think it is a lot to do with control, rationalisation, whatever you want to call it. It's a real pity that farmers who are doing wonderful things with their environment, their ecology, creating nutritiously dense food, are finding it more and more challenging, in some instances having to stop being able to supply to their customers the food that they need and the food they want.
We often talk about the free market, but a market free of control is a market that is very likely to be monopolised, and you feel that that's what's happening at the moment.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and it's getting worse. Nothing is telling me, or I see nothing on the horizon that says to me that it's going to go the other way. I think more and more abattoirs, smaller abattoirs, are shutting down. I know one just an hour and a half from here shut down. I think it was in the last 6 months. I think it was just very hard for him to compete, and he was looking after, and he was servicing a lot of the small producers, and there's less and less of those. Back in the day, Tim, every town had an abattoir, and as the big boys got bigger, they bought out the small abattoirs, and so their control continues. And I just don't think that's healthy for any consumer. Any consumer that's looking to buy meat, I just don't think that's a good idea, because you start monopolising meat. We know what the supermarket monopolisation has done for pricing and access and supply. The same thing is happening with meat, and I think it's pushing out the smaller producers. It's pushing out the farmers who are doing good things for the environment, who are doing good things for their customers, and it's making it very hard for them to remain viable. And very hard for people who are looking for clean, healthy, nutritious food to access.
Keeps towns viable too. Your business employs a number of people from your local area. Smaller businesses and more smaller businesses mean more employment in towns.
100%.
This has a downstream effect on the whole community, doesn't it?
100%. It's interesting. A lot of the smaller regenerative farmers who are doing paddock-to-plate, a lot of them didn't start as farmers, but what they've done by buying a block of land and growing pigs and chickens and cattle and so on, and creating a paddock-to-plate sort of business model, they've also brought to the community other skills. It might be marketing, it might be IT, and lots of other things. And so, if they can't, create a viable farm business and remain in those in the rural communities and offer their other services, which are very handy for their own businesses, for many other farmers in that area. That's an erosion of culture. Paddock-to-plate really puts the culture into agriculture. It's what we all used to do. We did have our small abattoirs in each town. People knew who their farmer was. They knew who their butcher was. They knew where the meat's from. And without access to that good, nutritious food, and without access to the farmers themselves, then it's a pretty sad state of affairs.
What would you like to see happen? What do you think needs to happen to ensure food security? Because we are talking about food security. We saw what happened in America when COVID hit. All of the big abattoirs shut down. They had no meat.
Well, we need more abattoirs that are independently run, whether it's through co-ops or private enterprise, it doesn't really matter. We need many more on-farm, preferably, and then they can reuse and recycle the byproducts of abattoirs. And support those local communities with jobs and with good viable businesses. So how can that come about? Well, I think government has something to do with this. I think government has got something to do with the fact that it's gone backwards, because they're making regulations so hard, so tough for people to comply.
Compliance has been weaponised, hasn't it?
100%. I know many people who have had 4 years applications in to build their own abattoirs. It's hard enough to get a processing facility on your farm, just to break down a body that's already been processed in an abattoir. To then build an abattoir on your farm, I don't know many people who have actually been able to do that. And that's what we need to do. We need sovereignty of food supply and meat supply in rural communities, not just servicing the needs of those communities, but the greater communities. And again, people from metropolitan areas, those who are conscious of where their food comes from, they need that access. They need access not just to the meat, but to the farmers and their stories. You know, farmers who are doing paddock to plate, they're selling the sizzle, not just the sausage, right? They've got wonderful stories to tell, and if they can't maintain the business model, which is essentially selling the sizzle and the sausage, then, as I said before, they're likely to leave, you know, move away back to the city and go, this farming game's not for me. So there's so many knock-on effects from the simple phenomena of not having abattoirs, not having processing facilities in country towns and rural communities.
If you want to see more processing facilities remain open to farmers and keep food sovereignty and security in your area, get onto your local member today and send this video to someone who really needs to understand where their food comes from. Charlie, thank you very much for your time today. I've really appreciated it with you. Good
Tim,
luck.
Awesome to have you here, and all the best with your future endeavours, and love to have you back here another time.
Same here, mate. I'd love to come back.
Sounds good. Thanks, Tim.
Make sure you hit the subscribe button if you like videos like this. There's one every week.
So I'm looking at you or there?
We're looking at the camera.
For the show.
And then when I talk to you, you look at me, we shake hands.
Yep.
And that's the shot.
Okay. Rightio.
Happy with that?
Yep. So you're going to say something and I'm going to shake your hand.
I'm going to warble a bit.
Okay, go for it.
And then we're going to shake hands.
I'll say, hello, Tim.
Oh no. Your sexiest voice that you can possibly imagine.
Oh yeah.
I'm on a picturesque 2,000 hectares just outside of Boorowa in New South Wales with Charlie Arnott, an 8th generation Australian farmer, and he's been regeneratively farmed. Start again.
I do that. It's a bugger of a word.